Good evening, everyone. Hello. Thank you for coming. I want to actually recognize Ray Masick, Michelle Foltz, and George Cole, who are in the back. We're here to listen and get some of this feedback. They've been working on the project for some time, and I'm grateful that they were able to come this evening. I also want to let you know that this is a television studio. You should not be surprised to learn that they're going to record this. This way, the folks on the BHS Expansion Committee who couldn't be here, who want to sort of hear that feedback, will have the opportunity to hear it. If there are things you want to write down and we can have later that you don't want to say out loud, we can work with that. But we thought it would be helpful to record this so we can use it as a reference later. I want to thank Livable Streets for running this meeting. Livable Streets is a nonprofit focused on safe, reliable, and comfortable travel in the Boston metro area for people in cars, on foot, on bikes, or on transit, and I'm sure they'll tell you more about it. I also want to thank you for coming. I know the meeting was late notice, and we did the best we could to get the word out. And so for the folks who heard about it and were able to come, I'm very grateful. It's just one more meeting, and we have a lot of them in this town. And so the folks who make the time, I appreciate it. My name is Tommy Vitolo. I am the state representative for most of Brookline, including this part of Brookline. And I've been an advocate for transportation. And so this is part of that role. I oppose the MBTA fare increases quite publicly. I've been active in the Better Bus process, and in fact, the MBTA has responded to some of my concerns or criticisms about some of the proposed changes for the buses that are in Brookline or affect Brookline. You may have heard we just rolled out the MBTA Youth Pass program in Brookline. That's a program that affords deeply discounted monthly and daily rides for young people aged 13 to 25 who are pursuing an alternative education or who are on government programs such as WIC or Section 8 housing. That came about when I heard that there was this program that Brookline wasn't participating in, and I reached out to the Transportation Board and the Select Board, and we rolled that out just a few weeks ago, so that's very exciting. And of course, the Brookline Hills T-Stop renovation, and I want to tell you a little bit about this project. In the big sense, this is a great project. This is about building a Brookline High School annex building in addition to the high school, not directly attached, but in fact, immediately adjacent to Cypress Street, where there's a medical building now, and it's going to come over the tracks, and so that the students who are using the building won't be crossing the tracks to go back and forth to school, but will in fact access the building from Tappan Street, and that's a really great thing. That was a bold, visionary idea for the town of Brookline to build a school over the T-tracks. It's certainly not a common thing, but the tight space and the willingness of the Brington Road neighbors to work with the town made it a possibility, and it's really exciting, and I'm very happy that we're doing it. As you might expect, this impacts the Brookline Hills T-Stop. Because it impacts the Brookline Hills T-Stop directly, physically, the MBTA did a great thing. They said, hey, Brookline, you're messing with our T-Stop, you gotta bring it up to modern standards. If you're gonna screw it up a little bit, you gotta fix it. And I think that was great that the T did that, because the T needs, frankly, all the partners it can find on improving transportation. And so the T and the Brookline High School Expansion Committee have been working on this project for quite a long time. This is the first time that the transit users have been expressly invited, specifically targeted, to make public comments about how this project impacts their experience. And I think that's really important. There's no doubt that the folks involved with the high school, teachers, students, parents, administrators, have had a lot of feedback, and that's great. That's really important. It's also the case that the Brington Road neighborhood has been working with these committees to make sure that their neighborhood gets the benefit of the bargain. But the fact of the matter is, thousands of people get on at Brookline Hills every day, and they have a daily experience with this T-Stop. And it was important to me to make sure that their experience, both current and potential future, was accounted for. And that's the purpose of this meeting. And so I believe that this project is going to be a great project for public education and has the potential to be also a great project for public transportation. And that with your help and the cooperation from the MBTA and the Brookline High School expansion project, we're going to get just that, a great project for all users in this community. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Livable Streets and let them run the show.
Thanks,
Stacy.
Tommy. Welcome. I'm going to give you this handout. Thanks for having me tonight. And I promise my presentation will be short. I'm more interested in getting everyone on the same page and then hearing your feedback. So we're a large enough group that we might need a little moderation, and I'll work on that. But the goal tonight is really to do what Tommy just said, to let you know what's happening and then provide a platform for you to provide more specific feedback. Just to give you a little context, because this meeting is different than other meetings, I do not work for the T. I am not a consultant. I am an advocate who has worked with Tommy before he was elected, and with many. I recognize some faces in the room. And my organization is Livable Streets Alliance. And what I often say is we aren't a transportation organization. We're an access and equity organization, and we focus on transportation on our streets, our buses, our trains, walking, biking, placemaking, to make sure that people can get where they need to go and that they feel good and that they feel safe. So we look at the intersection of experience with your sort of transportation options. And that is what I intend to do with you all this evening. One piece about the handouts that you have, again, to help clarify who I am and who I'm not. My staff took some existing designs and added some notes to them. So Livable Streets didn't create these. We put some notes on top, and I printed them out. And we'll get into this in a little bit so that you guys could actually sit at your seat, take notes. I literally brought extra pens with me if people are like to write, and that's easier than speaking out loud. And the idea is to just give you something in addition to my presentation to actually interact with, and to maybe take with you outside after the meeting or tomorrow to like be in the space and see if these designs make sense to you in life. All right, are we ready to get started? Yes. Okay, great. So a couple of things about how we work and just a little high-level background. Yes, go for it. Pass them around. My organization, in addition to our street-level advocacy, does a lot of outreach, and we build reports that help city and state agencies think more strategically about how they can redesign their assets to help people. So we have a report just on buses. We have one that really is focused on the Longwood area, and I'm going to pull out one statistic that I think is relevant to this project. And then we also do some reporting on safety. So my organization is thinking about all of these things when we look at a project like the Brookline Hill Station redesign. So about a year and a half ago, we went to the Longwood area, and part of the reason why we care so much about you all knowing that this redesign is happening is that we think something like 3,000 interactions is an appropriate number of interactions to have when you're making a big decision. That is talking to people, that's getting their feedback. So we're trying to get a sense of what people's needs in the area were. What we found is that of the people who drive to the Longwood area every day, 36% said that they would love to switch to another mode, preferably transit, but that there were problems with that option. And what was more interesting is that the largest majority of those people were from these four communities that already have what might be considered excellent transit access. So we talked to a ton of people who live in Brookline, who even live close to this stop, who said, you know what, it's inconvenient, or it's too hard for me to walk somewhere, or there are all these little barriers that add up, and so I just drive to work every day. So, you know, when we actually dug in a little bit and they talked about inconvenience, certainly the reliability and the frequency of the service was important, but station conditions and bus stop conditions were also in the top three. It really matters, and I think you all know this intuitively and personally, that your station serves you. And as a community, if this station doesn't serve the community, the ripple effect could be decreased safety for pedestrians and increased congestion and traffic. So it's like some of the context to just think about. It's not so much about the designs, which we'll get into, but about the universe we live in and how close you are to some really big epicenters. So why Brookline Hills? Who here knew that there were more than 3,000 daily riders on this stop, just this stop every day? Okay, yeah. And 39, this is the T's data, 39% of those riders do not have access to a car in their household. So it's not that they don't drive, it's that they literally don't have access. So again, it's a huge community asset. And if anything, given the growth of the community, you'd likely want to see the share increase to maybe 45 or 50% to increase population but decrease, again, congestion and car ownership. So now we're going to dig in. That's your context. More than 3,000 people. And this is where you can look at the first sheet. And for the new folks that walked in, I have one handout. I have one set of handouts, but I think you guys can share. So,
Are
yes.
questions possible? I want to finish first.
Let me finish,
Okay.
and then I promise I'm going to get through this section in 5 minutes, but I encourage you to write it down. So just some high-level thoughts on the existing conditions. I'm also curious who in the room uses this stop at least once a week. Okay, great. Then I'm not going to dig too much in. I think you know what's going on. But some things that are potentially points of conflict or points of frustration, they're 5-foot sidewalks, and when you have strollers, when you have winter, that doesn't feel like enough space, especially with children. So an opportunity to increase the overall space where people walk. There's also no real appropriate gathering or placemaking space. There's a lot of space designated for cars. And specifically of the MBTA parking spaces, they're only utilized around 55% of the time. So that means half of the time there are no cars in that space, but it's not allocated for people. So it again takes space away from the community and isn't maybe being used in the best way. And because of the layout of the parking lots, you have multiple entry and exit points, and I would imagine you've all experienced the chaos of school drop-off, cars going in and out, you trying to cross the street, and there's really only one crosswalk. So all of this leads to, when you're trying to get to the T, a lot of chaos and potentially danger, even when cars are moving slowly. So what is being proposed, and again, I'm not the expert, but I'm going to give you what I can read, is not a ton of difference. We're still looking at 3 driveways and quite a few parking spaces, which is something we would say, hey, maybe we should take a look at that and reconsider. There's no entry point on Brington, is that the correct pronunciation of the road? Which is something that I've heard maybe the neighbors don't love, but that there's a desire line is what we would describe it. Lots of people would like to come through that way, and so we need to consider those trade-offs and how to make it work for everyone. There are some parts where the sidewalk is widened and there's a better crossing, which is great. We like to see that, and it's a safer condition. But it doesn't extend all of the way to Cypress Street. So just like, to me, I think we could do a little bit better than this. But I would encourage you to take a look at this, and like I said, go outside with the plans, check it out. Does it feel good? Does it feel right? And I think the part that is maybe the biggest piece of news is that this black line is actually a wall. And so what you see here is what's proposed is a wall that would basically only allow one access point to get to the station. No?
It's a bad idea.
No.
Yeah, okay. All right. Sorry. I was like, did I get it wrong? You were just okay.
No, you're right.
It's a fence, not a wall.
Okay, a fence rather. Thank you. A fence or a barrier is maybe the best way to describe it. And my understanding is that, often when we see things like that, it's described as needed for safety or a different reason. And again, you should talk to people who came up with this design. I'm presenting what I'm observing. So what we are calling the enhanced concept with livable streets in the corner, this is like us playing with PDFs in our office to just help, again, talk you guys through, is to reconsider some of these things. So given the data, we would recommend that the MBTA parking spaces potentially be converted and that we really maintain only about 14 parking spaces for cars. And if you guys are concerned about parking, I need to talk to you about reasons why we might reduce the number of parking spaces and how that could be good for traffic and congestion and parking. But what that leaves is plaza space. And given the high ridership, having space where we could put benches, this is particularly important for people, children and older riders who sometimes need to sit and wait and grab their breath. Space that's a little, reflective of the great community space we have could be a good addition, and to open that up a little bit. And then instead of a fence, what we would consider maybe a better option to promote safety and awareness is what we might call a permeable barrier. So this could be plants, it could be trees, it could be other public art or something that creates spaces so that people can walk through and reflect how busy the station is, but that isn't necessarily a fence and could enhance the space. We'd also recommend sort of enhancing the sidewalks, which you'll see in here as well. And so again, this is all meant to help you all think about how we might make the space really about people and community first, and then overlay some of the other sort of, do the technical stuff after that and the requirements after that. So what I would like to do now, before we react, is go through just 2 sets of questions. So this will be different than what you're probably used to. We're only half hour in, so we've got time, and we're going to get lots of feedback. And we're also taking notes. So this is the point where you should be excited to speak up. So the first thing that I want to do is I know everyone's itching to talk about what they like or don't like. I would actually like to understand of people who currently use the station, what your experience is. And I've already asked, how often do you use the T? I'm curious, when you choose not to use the station, what is the reason for that? And if people have issues with the current design that you want to make sure are addressed before we get into what makes sense in terms of like improving the station. That is sort of a top question. So are there any issues you have that are top of mind about how you currently use it? Yes, sir.
So one of the, you only want to talk about how we use it or challenges that we have using it?
Both.
I see your data about the parking. I frequently show up and there is no parking space.
Yep.
So reducing parking or not enhancing the number of parking spaces to me is a lost opportunity.
Okay.
And to be clear, you're using the meters right at the station? That's
Exactly.
the kind of parking you're talking
Yes.
about?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, next.
Hi, I use the station every weekday to commute to work.
Yep.
And I also use it frequently on weekends. And the only drawback I have is when there's shuttle service, shuttle bus service. Although that hasn't been too bad. So I just want to.
Great. That's good.
It works well.
We take it every day as well. We
Yep.
walk to it, so we don't have parking issues. What we do like is the little house to stand in when it's freezing or it's blizzarding and pouring.
Yep.
And to have a shelter, maybe not an enclosed shelter, but a covered shelter, a little bit bigger on the other side, or maybe on both sides, I think would be useful. And the fact that it's just plain eyesore, the whole place is kind of an eyesore.
Other thoughts about the current conditions?
Okay, there's one issue with at this particular stop is basically the crossing going between the tracks. Okay, what you have is you have 3 crossings, one at the very beginning, one at the middle, and one at the end. The one furthest down is far away from just about anything. And the problem with the center one is that if a train basically it's when you have 2 trains on either side. If a train doesn't stop at the center one and goes all the way to the third one that's at the end, basically going towards Riverside. Basically that train will block if a train's on the other side, then the very beginning of the crosswalk will be blocked by a train on the other side, and a person will actually have to go on the tracks to get to that train.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
agree with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Often.
and basically the only other free one is right at the very back,
Okay.
Yeah.
which is just can be time consuming for
Okay.
anybody using it.
Yeah, and I saw some nodding of heads and other users.
And basically, the only solution is for a train to stop on the second intersection, so
Yeah.
that there's free crossing. But that's kind of sometimes it's done, sometimes it's not. So
Yep.
I have a question.
I'm gonna go here
okay.
first and then to you, just
Okay.
because I saw this hand first.
I take the train every day to work and often on the weekends. And I agree with the gentleman about when the trains cross each other, then you can't cross over the tracks and then you miss the train. It's also dangerous walking over the tracks and the stones because you could trip. So I recognized recently that the trains have sort of been abiding by that stopping in the cross, but it's not all the time. It's kind of, 70% of the time recently. So that would be great if there was just an actual place where they had to stop to make the crossing a lot safer. I also, in this enhanced concept, I like that because that plaza really gives a place for meeting people. Like when I feel like meeting at the train, it's kind of chaotic in terms of where to look for somebody. So like at Brookline Village, there really is a gathering place with benches, like camp groups meet there and school groups meet there, and that's very pleasant and really nice. It would also give kids, a place to gather, so I would be in favor of that. Also, on the other side of the tracks, it's not deep or wide enough to sort of gather, because often in the morning, one of the reasons in good weather that I choose not to take the T and walk to the bus line on Harvard Street is if I could see, oh my God, there's 125 people waiting for the train. I'm just going to take the bus today and then walk to Brookline Village. So I have that choice, but a lot of people don't, and then sometimes you'll wait for 3 trains in order to cram yourself on there.
Yeah.
And that's really terrible.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing a lot about the impact of the operations of the trains and how the space needs to reflect that.
Yeah.
So this is great.
So, yeah, deeper.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go to you and then.
I have a couple of questions. So
Yeah.
we use the T. We don't commute on a regular basis, but whenever we have a destination where it makes sense, we use it, particularly downtown. One impression that I've gotten with this degree of, we maybe use it 3 or 4 times a week, the train seems to stop at random places. I don't understand why it can't always be in the same place. That kind of predictability would help in a number of ways, I think. And it seems arbitrary to me. One question I had is how does this frequency of use, 3,700 a day, how does it compare with other stops?
I don't have that data with me, but I can provide that, or we can send it as a follow-up. And it is a pretty high use stop.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
And the other big question I have is, why did they do this? I mean, there are some things about it that make 0 sense.
Can I ask you to clarify, why did they build it in its
Why
current
did
conditions?
Why did they funnel all the traffic into one place? And
In the design, you mean?
Do you mean?
in the design,
The
yeah.
proposed design on the
Yeah.
second sheet?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I don't, did
So-
anybody who draw up this design ever use this station?
So what I'm gonna do is capture that as a question, finish this feedback, and then we do have people in the back of the room who could probably answer that question briefly, if that's okay with everyone.
Fine with me.
Great. I'm gonna go to you, and then I see a hand back here, and then you, sir.
Hi, I'm John Dempsey. I live on Brington Road, about the farthest away from the station that you can get to on Brington Road. So I currently get to the station by, it's about a 5-minute walk, maybe a 6-minute walk, depending on who's accompanying me. And I have to go all the way to the end of Brington Road, cut up over Cypress, and then come down the steep sidewalk. Sometimes I run into an elderly neighbor in her 80s who's resting there because she's climbed up to Cypress and then she's climbing down, or she's making the return. And I know that sidewalk is not handicap accessible. I use this T randomly. Fortunately, at my age, I don't have to commute, but I use it randomly throughout the week, but probably more often with my wife on the weekends. And so we're going downtown. We're going, out at night or something. There are various things like weather and all those are considerations, but I think our default mode is go to the T. There are times when we will carpool or something like that.
Great.
I just wanted to point out to everybody that the situation will change at this station in order for the MBTA to accommodate the accessibility requirements. And the current middle of the station crossing will go away in order to accommodate the 8-inch raised platform. So that to accommodate a 3-car train, the crossings will be at either end of the station. What concerns me, and I know this is getting into the next topic, is the fencing in and the trying to get to either crossing on the end. And the way it's currently designed, really the only crossing that works is the one at the western end. And I think that's the real problem and the constraints. And I don't know if people noticed last evening and this morning and even now, the snow fencing that's been put out there to indicate where the fencing would be. But it's a real safety concern for the T-riders either entering or exiting the station.
Thank you. And then I saw a hand over here, and then you, and then
Hi, I don't know if this is off topic or not, but I've been reading about the T's efforts to try to recapture some of the fares that are stolen from the rest of us by people who choose not to pay.
Yep.
I'm wondering do you know if any of the proposals that they have would affect the infrastructure of the station in any way?
So not in a way that should materially impact the design of the station. For the most part, all that it will mean is that you'll be able to tap on in the back of the train. So you should be excited about the automated fare collection change, unless you've been sneaking on and not paying. Then it's a problem for you. But I would say that the design impacts are nominal.
So
they're not.
the platforms will remain as they are?
Yeah. It's really about being able to tap onto the vehicle.
Thanks.
Yeah, how do you come to the station? Interesting comment from me, because I sometimes ride my bike to the station. And I want to make sure that people understand bicyclists are important contributors to Brookline, and anything that's going to increase. So I would suggest that this plan needs to think about the bike racks, maybe increasing the bike racks. What I like about Brookline Village is they have a canopy, which sometimes I decide to go to that station instead because of a snowy day. I will feel like my bike is covered, right? Yep. Which is not so good at Brookline Hills, and I think that can improve. The other thing I'm thinking about in relation to what other people are saying about how the station is being designed, I'm still learning about it, is to really think about desire lines and how people use spaces. And I think we need to broaden the view in a holistic way to look at all of the forces that are in play here. It's not like the building and placemaking are mutually exclusive. The architects should be thinking about placemaking while they're making buildings. It's not like, let's let the placemaking landscape design team figure that out. It needs to be worked out holistically. So I think what I'm seeing early on is there's a little bit of disconnect. In particular, I see some particular pinch points. Why are people being funneled to a point which is the skinniest piece between Penn Street and the tracks? There might be another way of looking at this, and I'm just suggesting that it might need to be looked at in a broader way first.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was someone over here. Yes, you, sir. Sorry.
Hi. So my name's Brian Hooklighter. I live on Elm Street, so it's a few blocks away, and I take the T not every day to work, but a lot of days, and I take it home a lot of times. I use it on the weekends. I guess I look at this plan and I think about all the times when I'm sort of walking across Cypress Park and you see the train coming and people are running. And so the thought of a fence that then adds another block to that run to try to get the tee, because if you miss the tee on a snowy day, you're just, it's a miserable. We're going to have people, those fences will be torn down. We will have people going crazy if there's a fence that requires everybody to miss train after train because they're coming off of Cypress and they see it, but then they have to run further. I just feel like it's such a poor choice. And I understand that there's some concerns about safety in the school and trying to make sure that works, but it just seems like it's the wrong solution. I also just wanted to say about the cars, it just seems crazy to me that, a decision about such a small number of spaces that really don't accommodate very many people, and I'm not even sure who's driving to those spaces, because mostly this station serves people in the neighborhood who are walking there or biking or whatever else. Who is driving to this station and where are they coming from? And do those people, could they just drive to a different station that has like a real parking lot instead of trying to have the tail wag the dog where you've got literally like 8 or 14 or whatever it is spaces, and we're going to say, we're going to design everything around letting 8 people have like a nice little parking space next to the T, and all the pedestrians are, having to run an extra block and jump through all these hoops and do these things that don't make any sense. It just seems backwards. I also just was wondering about the ADA access issues, and I couldn't figure out, if someone is in a wheelchair or has a stroller coming off of Cypress, how do they even get, do they have to just walk all the way along the sidewalk and cut over to get through that little narrow cattle chute, as it's called here? Or is there some better, easier way, the path that we can make that's accessible so that, seniors aren't having to stop and lean on the fence because they're tired out and there's so much further to go.
Yeah, I'm capturing these questions and I'm going to see if we can get answers to them. I'm going to take you one more time and then I'm going to change the conversation to what we want, if folks in the room are comfortable with that. Looking for nods, no burning questions. Okay, great.
2 things. Why is it one way at the Brookline entrance? I don't understand that. What could they have possibly been thinking?
Speak up.
One way at the Brigden entrance. He was curious.
It's like a diode. You can go one way, but you can't go the other way.
Okay.
I forget what's permitted. Exit from the station, but not entrance. So that's why the old lady has the walkway.
Yep.
The other thing that I think is something to consider, those signs that tell you when the train is coming, it's good if you're already at the station. But if you're walking from approaching the station, you can't see those things. Why not turn them so you can see what's happening?
Okay, great. So I'm hearing a lot of stress around actually getting to the station. We've all had that experience. Lots of access point questions. I do want to shift the conversation to what we want and get your reactions to those sort of page 2 and page 3, because you may see some of the stuff that's being proposed and say hey, I really like that. There might be someone in the room who's I am a champion of the fence. I haven't heard that yet, but you might be out there and we want to hear from you. Or you might like or not like some of the ideas that we proposed. This is about actually hearing your questions, your concerns, if you think something was missed in any of this. So we'll sort of do a similar, just popcorn style. But I've been capturing some questions, and I'm just going to read them off, and if there's someone in the back of the room who can answer the questions briefly, it would be great. And if you know.
We'll just look here and listen.
Okay. So then to reiterate what the questions were, there were some questions around ADA access issues from Cypress Street and what that experience would be. There was questions about why a fence or a barrier needed to be included. The questions about the one-way access. And then just hearing your comments, I'm curious if a parking survey has been done of the people. This is something we often do when we're looking at bus priority or other projects. MAPC has done this, actually understanding who uses the parking spaces in addition to how often they're being used to actually answer that question. It could produce sort of a potentially a different result for the area. So I think that's questions that we would maybe like to posit.
I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Okay.
I can. Many of them I can.
That's
My name is George Cole. I'm a co-chair of the Brookline High School Expansion Committee, and I'm a 20-year member of the Building Commission in Brookline. I'm a volunteer. I do this for fun. Why don't you ask each question, and I'll tell you. And first of all, I want to say this is great. This is the kind of input that we should have incorporated, will incorporate. It's not too late. Nothing's in concrete. And this input is really valuable because we have been working for 2.5 years with the town, the neighborhood, the school department, the teachers, the students, and the MBTA extensively. We have not heard from you, so it's really great that you organize this. I'm really thankful.
Thank you, and thank you for being able to answer whichever questions you're able to.
So I'll try.
Okay, ADA access issues around Cypress Street, do you have answers for that question? Does someone have to go all the way around?
They would have to go all the way around. The station is currently not ADA compliant. One of the big aspects of the platform renovation is to make it compliant with current life safety and accessibility standards. That's very important to the T and it's very important to the town.
Okay. I'm gonna not have us have discussions around this because you're okay, but we can provide feedback if you have questions or additional questions or concerns. But I'm gonna go through this and then we'll start with comments.
Could I just suggest you put one of the visuals
Yes.
back on the screen? Yeah.
This one maybe? The proposed
anyone.
concept?
It's
Yeah,
better than the
that's good.
questions,
Yeah, okay, thank you for that suggestion. The one way on Brington?
So that's the result of an extensive multi-party process with the Brington Road neighborhood primarily, and secondarily with other community members around the station. And as you can imagine, a lot of people do not want access from Brington Road, and a lot of people do want access from Brington Road. What is required by the MBTA, which is a really important party to this conversation, is they require an emergency egress from that platform, from the southern platform. Whether people access that platform, that isn't required. That's almost a to be determined. But one thing we do know is people need to egress there. The path is very much like the paths from Middlesex Road at the Chestnut Hill T Station, or the Beaconsfield path from Clark Road to the Beaconsfield Station. They're paths, they're not major access points, there's not a lot of signage, there's not a lot of lighting. They are really just secondary means of egress from that platform. That's what I know.
Okay. Again, we're saying this is not right or wrong. This is just, we have the information. You guys can share thoughts on that. Thank you for that very detailed response. The barrier, the question of the fence, the specific reason for that.
Sure. The design of the station was almost handled as a separate piece of work. AECOM is our designer for the station. They do a lot of MBTA work. And the MBTA was specifically concerned about students coming out of the entrance from the new Cypress Street building downstairs and just flowing across the tracks. And they wanted to control the flow of kids out of the school. They're really, really concerned about the liabilities of having all these kids around the T station tracks. And they and us, sort of posited one way to control that is a fence. I personally don't like it, but it was really important to the T, and we can go back to them and revisit it. But that was the reason it was put there. It wasn't put there to constrain access. It was there for safety reasons primarily.
I didn't understand that. Can you explain it a little better?
Sure. If you see those stairs coming down from the new building on the left-hand side,
Yeah.
that's where the major entrance to the new We're calling it the 9th grade academy, the
Yeah.
Cypress Street building. There are going to be, probably 500 to 600 kids in that building.
Yeah.
And the team was really concerned about kids just wandering onto the
Doing
tracks.
something like this.
Correct.
Okay.
That was the reason for the fence. It wasn't to create a hostile commuting environment. It was really to preserve kids. We call them knuckleheads. They are kind of knuckleheads. They're 9th graders.
I don't
And that was the
understand
key.
why
Well,
somebody
so
would
I
follow
would,
a kid coming down.
sir,
the street.
sir, I would, we can take that note and say that that doesn't quite make sense to people, but I want to finish with my last question, if that sounds good.
Sorry.
And then I'm just curious if there had been any, sort of parking survey or deeper analysis of who is actually currently using the parking.
So right now, the T has 8 metered parking spaces out there. That's what they have currently. And one of the conditions of us reconfiguring this station was the T was absolutely adamant that their parking spaces are preserved.
George, you're calling them their parking spaces, but they're controlled by the town. The town gets the revenue. The town maintains the meters.
Yeah, but
Whose spaces are they?
They are part of the T's easement, and they are T spaces. We do collect revenues from them, but the T is really the owner of those spaces.
They own the property underneath the spaces.
Yes.
Understood. Thank you.
So they were really strong about that. It was a long discussion, and we said, can we just move them to another place that might work better in light of the new building and configuration? I said yes. And we had long negotiations about where those spaces would end up, and they ended up where they're depicted now. The rest of those spaces are town of Brookline spaces used by teachers at the high school. Those are town spaces used by teachers at the high school. And for the high school, parking for teachers for all the schools in Brookline, parking for teachers is a huge issue. And we've gotten lots of permits to park on the street during the day. Neighbors do not like that. So what we're trying to do is reduce the impact on neighborhoods by concentrating parking, where we can on town property. Those are what those spaces are about.
Who uses the spaces along Tappan, those ones that are diagonal along Tappan? Are those town space, or those teachers, or
Those are all
those
teachers, permit parking for the teachers, yes.
only teachers?
Yes. You mean the diagonal on the other side, right?
Yep.
Could you point?
Yes, the diagonal section.
Yes,
Yep.
that's all teacher permit parking. And there's also, the permit parking involves Tappan Street, that parking lot, and then other streets.
Great.
So I asked the architects last week at the Transportation Board the size of the existing proposed plaza at the base of the stairs to the entry to the new school. And it is only about 60 by 60, what they said, and which is small. If you think about the number of, first of all, students who might come out there during a fire drill or are entering the building, and you think about the number of people crossing at rush hour to get to the station. So I think the enhanced concept where you're increasing the size of that plaza makes a lot of sense and would somewhat mitigate the need for a strong barrier to the platform. So I want to just say in the enhanced concept that should be noted. And I really feel like the school committee and the building committee has been sort of with blinders on looking at the building, and it needs to evolve to a bigger concept of what's going on here. And I'll say as disclosure, I'm on the design review committee for the field, which wants to make that path that's existing across the field to the T station work with all of this. But I think, it all needs to be considered together because it's a complex problem.
Great. So it sounds like we're transitioning. Can I get just a show of hands of who wants to share what you like or don't like about these concepts, and more importantly, regardless of what you're seeing in front of you, what you want and need in the new station. Who already has burning comments? I see Scott. Okay, we'll start there, and then I'll go to Bob, and then we'll make our way over here. Okay.
Sure. I think many of what I would say, by the way, I'm Scott Englander, town meeting member here in this precinct, and I frequently use the station, get there either by walking or most of the time or biking. So I'm familiar with the experience very personally, but I'm also in touch with a lot of the sentiments that have been communicated to me by my neighbors, et cetera, who live around, and other TMMs. So I think a lot of these sentiments have been echoed already by folks in the room. One of the things that I should also say by way of background here is that providing thousands of everyday Green Line riders who are boarding here, providing for them better in the design is really a matter of transportation equity, not only in its own right, but also because the Complete Streets policy of Brookline says it should be. And just to quote from the policy here, projects, and I quote, shall be designed and implemented to provide safe and comfortable access for healthful transportation choices such as walking, biking, and mass transit. The needs and safety of the town's most vulnerable users shall be given special consideration during project planning. And under the policy, people walking are considered to be vulnerable. And I'll quote again, transit facilities such as shelters and seating must be fully considered and implemented in the design. So I think we have an excellent architectural team working on this. They're really great designers, and I think, coming out of this, we should be allowing them to give us a better design. As part of better design, good design should rely on good landscaping and well-designed paths that enter the platform along natural desire lines, as some of the other folks have said, rather than using fencing to keep people where we want them. It should be obvious just intuitively from the way the plaza, if we turn that into a plaza or something, where you'd want to be and where you'd want to go to access the track. And but with regard to the issue of shelters specifically and seating, the current ones are undersized. The seats get wet when it rains or snows. And so that really should be usable for all the people who use the station. The area that will be under the building will form a naturally sheltered space. And so why not capitalize that with extra seating, et cetera, in that location? So I'm confident that we can address a lot of these issues.
Great.
Hi, I'm Bob Sloan. I live in Precinct 1. And I want to bring up the way that the Longwood station is laid out because of Brookline. First of all, I think there probably is data, but I've not seen it yet, about the peaking, whether there's a lot of kids that arrive all at once at this station, either coming or going to school. And the suggestion that you're going to have a whole bunch of kids right at that plaza would relate to the data. Mm-hmm. Do they all leave at once when they're dismissed from school or whatever, and run down the stairs and stand in that plaza? I think we need to know what kinds of numbers we're talking about. We have no idea. And furthermore, I think that the Longwood station is also very peak oriented. We get hundreds of people that get off there to go to the Longwood Medical. And they cross in the same way we're talking about here, one crossing at each end. But our crossing is basically at one end, the other end is not used. And all those people have to go across that one crossing. It's very wide, which is very nice, but it's funneled right at the area where you're coming to the station. It's right there. So it's very well located. And I think that having something so badly located doesn't fit with the numbers as I'm kind of psyching them out. I don't know what they are at all. Mm-hmm. I think someone should be looking at the numbers and trying to figure out what kinds of peak periods you're going to have here with the kids or with other people. Maybe there's a peak period now, I don't know, when all the kids arrive at once or leave at once. But I think that's something you really have to know to inform the design. That's missing.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm Diane Sokol. This has been my T-stop for 30 years now in Brookline. And I'm sorry I came in late, so stop me if I say something that somebody else has already said. But what I commented last week at the Transportation Board is the current MBTA parking spaces make a nice loop. You can come in, I don't use it for parking, but people looking for a parking space come in, survey the parking spots. If there isn't any, they just keep going. Or somebody comes into that loop, kiss and drops off somebody who goes to the T and they keep driving. The current MBTA space is a dead-end lot. Somebody goes in, finds out there's no spaces, they have to do a 3-point turn at the end of the station platform where everybody's trying to get into or out of or near that. So I don't think that lot works as well as the current. I think there does need to be a lot of drop-off space because people do drop off and pick up at that station. In terms of fences, I think you can use other things to keep these so-called roughhousing Brookline High students in order. A handicap ramp on that plaza to get to that platform 8 inches up. The ramp would serve as a barrier to, constrain those students who want to spill out onto the tracks. So that would provide a secondary entrance onto the platform. You could make it a ramp so it's accessible. Covered bike rack in that area could also create a barrier to constrain the students that would be helpful for people, and it wouldn't be, a fence. So I think they need to be a little more creative about how to provide additional access to the platform, how to make it safe for students exiting and entering, and how to make the station useful for other than the students. Because at last week's presentation at the Transportation Board, the first slide that went up about the design criteria, one of the criteria was about students using the MBTA station. And sorry, a lot of other people use the MBTA station also. And they need to think beyond just the students.
Great. Other folks want to share thoughts about what you want in the future? Yes.
Well, one thing, just noticing, kind of picking up on that comment is, Tappan Street is one way. And anyone who's come off the T and is trying to cross there will know that the cars come racing down that street sometimes, and there's really no need for the street to be as wide as it is. So it's nice to see that they've kind of narrowed it down in a few places in the proposed concept. It looks like, part of that is to create a drop-off zone where cars can pull in and let someone off to get up to the station without having to pull into the parking lot and do a 3-point turn or anything else. You can just drop them off along that stretch of curb there, which is like a widened, kind of pull-in zone. And I do like that. I really hope that, picking up on what Deborah said about the redesign of the park, that there's some thought into kind of the entrances and the connections, because it really doesn't work that well right now. There's kind of this path that goes across, and then you have to walk over to cross. And there's sort of limited entrances to the park sort of further down. So there's not much of a connection to get across the street. You kind of feel like you're having to just create your own desire path in the middle of, wait for the cars to slow down and stop and then just walk out in front of them. So I just think it's nice to see some of those things in the design seem to be working, or at least getting to that concept, which I just think is a good thing.
Yes.
Was there any thought of speed bumps?
I can't answer that question, but I will add it to the list.
Because the cars do go quickly there.
Great. I'm also just going to add sort of analysis of speeds in general. I would imagine we'd want people going far less than 20 miles an hour around children. So having more data on how fast people are going could be helpful in decision making.
Sidewalks are always an issue, and I see on the enhanced concept, well, on both, they're 11 feet. I don't know what they are now, but.
5.5.
5.5, okay. So what about on Cypress? Because that's the one, like, I think it's been neglected, like, we're looking at Tappan Street and all this, but so much of the traffic, like the football players, the runners, the, moms with babies, on Cypress Street, like, I face it every single day at the end of the day, where you have to actually stop, let runners go by, let football players go by because they're in packs of people. And, also the accessibility that John was talking about people really not being able to sort of make it up and down that hill. And I'm not sure about the new grading for that hill on, on Tappan. But that would be really great if that could be made accessible. That might be a tall order because it is very steep and it gets extremely slippery in the icy conditions.
That's something we're looking at. Okay.
Yeah.
I see Jack, and I'll go here, and then I'll go here. Okay.
This is a question relating to pedestrian traffic too. So I noticed it's called the 9th Grade Academy. Does that mean that that building will be principally used by 9th graders, and will they be spending most of their day, all of their day, or some of the day in that building? How often will they be leaving the building to go to other buildings in the high school complex? It seems to me it relates to, will there be certain moments at 10:15 in the morning where 100 students are going to come out of the building, or it would be nice to have some sense of that to figure out what the pedestrian flow is.
I'm adding that to the list of questions. That's great. There's also like a big difference between a 9th grader and a 12th grader. We all know the universe of high school students.
I've been a strong advocate for the two-way access from Brington Road. And that two-way access, the way it's drawn on the map, the drawing impacts my neighbors, the direct abutters there. One issue is privacy. The path, as shown, goes right beside their fence. They having dinner in their yard, and there's a public path directly on the other side of the fence. And the other neighbor is concerned about her automobile, which is parked right there, and the path skirts right in the back of the automobile. And those are natural concerns. We thought, I've been whining about this for 2.5 years. We thought that the MBTA, we thought that the town of Brookline would take over the path, and then there was a rumor that, well, if we have egress and ingress, the MBTA will take over that path, and then you have major lighting, major signs, major fences, and all of that. I propose no path, and what we have is a route, is a desire where people use their own desire lines, which means a shared access to and from the station that you're sharing with delivery vehicles, you're sharing with an occasional car, and but not unlike what we do in downtown crossing. Nothing different from that. So that I would like to expunge path from our dialogue and just call it a route. And we can talk about how that route is made safe and made attractive. And that would also enhance the landscaping, which is another concern of my neighbors, rightful concern.
Well, and I'm just going to add along to some of this, having more information about how the space is currently used and thinking more deeply about people might want to use it or aren't thinking about it. We often see with paths, and this is true of greenways across the state, that they get sort of thrown out because people have misperceptions of what does and does not happen on paths. And so it sounds like we need a little more information about what is currently happening and what may be truthful versus a concern that may not bear out based on data. Okay, I see Hannah. And then I'm just going to sweep this way if that's okay. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, in addition to what John was saying, if the route could be on the on the school's side, because my car is on the other side. And so having this beautified route would be great. And then the school department and the town of Brookline can maintain it in a safe way for us, and it would not interfere with traffic, with vehicle traffic as much.
Now, do I see? No, it's good.
I don't see a kiosk on this proposed concept. The kiosk that's currently on, where?
It's not on the enhanced either, is it?
Yeah,
There-
I mean on the
for the
enhanced
heat.
view. So right now, if you go out there on a cold morning, it's practically full of people.
I would imagine it's still there.
No, it's not. No,
Nope.
because
Okay.
the fare.
I was wrong.
okay
Thanks,
on
Tommy.
Well, I understood from correspondence with Scott that having it heated is a major issue, and I can understand that, but just an enclosure, when there's nasty weather,
Yeah. Or very beautiful sunny weather on a hot day. I will say that's one of the things we've noticed, that shade is really important also for children and for older adults. So it's something to keep in mind.
And I would just add, even when the heat is broken in the kiosk, it's not windy.
Yeah.
Right, so on a cold, windy day, you go in and it's a tough door to slide, but you slide that door closed, and it's 30 degrees, but it's not windy. And that makes a big difference, even if it's not heated.
I just wanted to offer an observation. My understanding is the reason that those little buildings are heated is that the current fare machines need them to function. And that now the T has developed ones that can sit out in the open. It has nothing to do with the patrons. And so I'm serious. So I just want to caution people about thinking that those were put there for our benefit.
That's a helpful perspective. I would say that it's not, but I think it's a good example of the current conditions demonstrating the current need. And what we're hearing over and over again is people need some cover, people need some space.
No, I'm not saying they're not a good idea.
Yeah.
I've used them, but I'm just saying
No.
that was not the reason they were put there.
Yeah. Okay, folks, I will come back here, but I just want to make sure. Is there anyone else on this side that has thoughts? The quiet side of the room. Okay.
So my name is Philip Blackcow, and I live in South Brookline, which is why we own a car and therefore have to park at the T. I'm curious, are you able to use the town spaces if you're taking the T?
I don't. That is a question for the people who use the space. I am not an expert. No.
I thought outside of school hours.
Outside
Yes.
of school hours,
You can-
correct. That's all prohibited parking.
But
Oh, so all the town spaces would be permitted.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a room for the teachers.
And can I just make a point with respect to the heated huts? They may be there to enable the pay station to work, but I've been there many times where the pay station still freezes up and you can't press the buttons.
Well, it's the MBTA. What do you expect?
There's a whole set of different meetings you can go to just on how you pay for your fares.
Sure. Just as a point of information on long-term parking, I served on the staff task force that analyzed and made recommendations to on the meter rates all around town, and as well as time periods for meter operation. And one thing I learned as part of that process is that there are other long-term, that is 13-hour spaces around town. The nearest ones to here would be Washington Square along Beacon, Beacons Field, Brookline Village, and Longwood. Now, some of those, like Longwood, are very heavily subscribed because it's walking distance to the medical area. But others, there is very low utilization of. And so and they're within a few minutes drive of this station. We also have a new 672, I think, car parking garage at Brookline Village, which, part of the intent was for use by the community for purposes such as this. So.
Okay. Great, thank you. Any other sort of final thoughts or, yes?
Can you put up the enhanced concept?
Yes.
So there was some discussion about that. I guess it's the little plaza with sort of cross hatching that's about 60 by 60. And I just, for one, I'm not alone in this, but the thought of having a larger plaza there that could have some benches, be a little bit more like, some of the spaces around the stations at Brookline Village or Longwood, that are just more pleasant and kind of like a nice urban plaza that can, serve as a gathering place. I just think that would be really incredible. And, I would really support that. And I'm sure there's lots of other people that would. So, again, I know it's trade-offs. We're not in, some big greenfield area where there's just acres and acres of land to do all of these things. And we're in a tight urban place. And so there's trade-offs between parking and, whether you say, okay, we're going to have fewer spaces for teachers, which means some of them have to park on surrounding streets. And, I think a lot of the neighbors are used to that, but maybe it means a little bit further walk for some people to get to work in the morning. But again, I think it's a trade-off that's worth it. So that'd be my comments.
And I would second that it also it makes it closer to a win-win for the high school building, because I think it would be an enhanced experience for the students as well. And I think that's really what the community should look for, is something that unifies what the high school is, because this neighborhood, Precinct 6, really supported this building in the high school expansion there, but I think it can't be at the expense of the T Riders, and this would start to, I think, make a win-win situation out of that.
Okay.
I just have one question. The T station, where it's located, I gather might be flexible. Do we know any idea at all? Could you move it westward a bit so that the crossing would be aligned with the new plaza, say?
I don't know the answer to that question, but we can put it in the notes to ask someone who might have a better sense of that.
I can. The station, it's a 3-car station with a crossing at each end, and it's really constrained by the geometry of the MBTA easement. We really tried to shift it back and forth, and there really was very little play in the location of the platforms due to just the geometry of the MBTA easement.
Yeah, you've got curves at sort of either end. You've got the curve after it goes under that underpass at Cypress, and it curves at the other end, so I can see.
To move it further west would mean actually taking properties from private homeowners by eminent domain, and we didn't want to get into that.
Okay.
Just an idea of, and it was discussed at transportation to add a Blue Bikes station, docking station there. I think that would be attractive for some commuters.
Is there bike parking in the enhanced concept now?
No.
I don't see any.
No, but we
It's
would.
a blank slate. I think they just said
Yeah, the idea was
drew a
to
square.
the idea was to say, like, if you had significantly more space, what might you be interested in putting there? So certainly, Blue Bike Station, enhanced parking. I mean, bike parking, not enhanced parking.
Shelter.
Shelter. There are just more options for
I
placement.
think those need to be listed as requirements, not just, hey, what am I to do with all this space? You could line it up with the parking. When you take the Caltrain, they've got covered bike parking. I mean, it's the 21st century, and not to have any bike parking and better pedestrian covered shelter is just inhumane and insane.
Thank you.
Okay, see, end up here.
14 spaces compared to 37 or 3,200 riders just doesn't seem equitable, especially when those drivers can find other places where there are more parking spaces and they're adjacent to T-stops. It's forcing something into this space that doesn't make sense, back to me.
I support the idea that, that we are reducing the parking that's there today. But today we have parking that's sort of blocking the T. Because there's no fence, you can walk through it. It's not very pleasant. It's kind of a litter-strewn lot. But, and there's like sand there all the time. And it's a hideous station. But there's going to be a lot of contention there. And we shouldn't have, the pedestrians who want to access the T shouldn't have to go through an army of students, which no one knows how many there are going to be. It's clear there's going to be contention, and there should be no contention with cars either. So this kind of enhanced concept works. Maybe the park there could be, and there needs to be a drop off. I think, as people have said, it has to be a requirement. That's the most popular feature, I think, of the whole parking area now, is the drop-off.
There is a
Yeah.
drop-off all along
Yeah.
Tappan, that section.
So this is a drop-off to the
Where the trees are.
west
Yeah,
of
the
the
trees.
crosswalk.
If you look here,
Yeah,
you might
it's
copy.
hard to look. We have there are copies as well. There is some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been suggesting, why don't we do some observations and see where people are coming from and when they get off the train, where they're going to. I mean, this is kind of a fundamental. I looked at the transportation study that was done last June for the high school, and the only thing that was studied was vehicles. Really, it didn't count pedestrians in any intersection, as far as I can tell, or do counts of people coming to and from the station. You could, what people do these days is they mount video cameras for a few days and then are able to analyze the images to really get the data quickly. And so I think, part of the design going forward, part of the process should be to understand how it's used now, and that should inform the design. A number of people have talked about the alignment from the path across the park. Where the path is ultimately is in flux because of that project's currently underway too. But
Yeah,
I think part of the
just speaking from being on that design committee, I think that committee would respond to this overall if there's a clear idea of where that desired path
Right.
wants to be. So I think I don't think that's the obstruction.
Right. As far as I can tell, the way it is currently, the reason it doesn't continue straight across the street there is because there's a curb cut across the street, which is the entry to the parking lot.
There's
And
parking spaces along that stretch
Yeah,
of parking.
it's also the
Well,
You lose parking.
Yeah, but you could go straight ahead of you without a parking space, and you would make it. The problem today is what's on the other side, and we have to be careful when we're designing, where those curb cuts are on the other side, that doesn't preclude some alignment there.
Well, if there were a larger plaza, the natural thing would be to come straight across.
Right.
And I think that the design of the Park and Recreation project could respond to that, but I think,
Okay, we got the note. I do want to sort of bring the meeting to a close soon, but are there any comments that you don't think have been brought up yet before I share a couple of thoughts and we talk about next steps? Yes.
Could I say that tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on the 5th floor of Town Hall, we'll be discussing these exact same issues, and I encourage you all to come and make your thoughts clear. I'm sorry, it may be redundant and it's a time sink, but we're having that meeting specifically at 6 o'clock, 6 to 7, to discuss these very issues, and you're welcome to stay from 7 till 10 for the rest of the Brookline High School Expansion Committee's meeting.
Thank you. I was going to bring that up, but you captured it. So a couple of other things. We have been taking notes tonight, and this will all be consolidated and shared with the appropriate team. Other things that I would offer that weren't brought up is I'm curious if the teachers have been offered other transportation mitigation measures like free T-passes. I'm happy to talk about that offline. I know this is an issue in districts across the metro area, and there may be other ways that we could be really hyper-focused on making sure those teachers get to school.
We were moving ahead preliminary with the transportation demand management, as you suggest.
Yes.
So that's starting, it's in the town now and we're looking at it.
Okay, great. And then one other thing that could be helpful is if you move forward with if we see a larger plaza in the future, working with the students to design the plaza is the best way to keep them off the tracks. So we would highly recommend a student-focused design process should you move forward with more space, because they will tell you what they're more interested in than the trains. So I would just like to share that thought. So yeah, we're going to consolidate all this. If you want to stay in touch with Livable Streets, I'm happy to take your email address or give you my card. I really appreciate the time. This was announced 5 days ago. I'm so impressed by the level of engagement, the thought that went into this. And I would say, as the team has shared, they're not done yet. So go to your T-stop, get additional thoughts, go to the meeting tomorrow night, send an email, because you're experts in your own experience, and that's what we're interested in sharing with the team. So thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.